Here we go. Okay, we are live. It looks like the technology is working here. So welcome. This is the Future of His Story. Namaste. Happy to be here and very honored and excited to be joined by a very special guest, this beautiful being you can see here with me, uh, Peter Eugène Bennett. We met some time ago, and you just meet someone, you before you even speak with them, you just see someone and you see something special, you feel something special. This is definitely one of those beings, and I'm sure you're seeing it and feeling it as we join here. So brother, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for coming in to be number 3 of our Future of His Story.
3, the magic number, and thank you very much, Martin, for inviting me on this podcast. It's an honor.
Beautiful, brother. So we met a few weeks ago, where you were leading the Sacred Sons EMX, and what an incredible event. I've been sharing about it since then. Um, and so I really, and this kind of history of, or the Future of His Story, has been coming for some time, and I really wanted to bring you on here because I wanted to just say, like, I've been around the men's work. I've been around, like, holding space for men and women for some years, and I've been in the men's workspace for a few years. And I want to just say to you, because I haven't talked about it, this men's workspace that you and the team around you is the most balanced men's workspace that I've ever been. So powerful, but the most balanced of masculine and feminine energy that I've ever been part of. And that was just incredible to see and feel. And it's a credit to Sacred Sons and the leadership, you guys that are bringing this. So I'd love to step into, like, your story. So this is kind of like the past, present, and future of masculinity. So just for those who don't know you, maybe to get to know a bit about you and your journey, and then we can get into the work that you're doing. So I'd love to hear a little bit about you and your journey in this crazy earth suit where we find ourselves.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess a good way to summarize my story is, before I was born, my father's 3 best friends growing up were all called Peter. And about 2 years ago, someone was like, "That was your first men's circle." And I was like, "Oh, yeah." He named me after his best friend. So, in some ways, I feel that my origin story was destined to do men's work, to bring men and women together to play with these energies that you described, the masculine and the feminine. And I felt growing up that was something that, as a young person, I wasn't really too aware of. I don't know if you have this, Martin, but just being sensitive, being emotional as a kid, as most children are, from an old school father, a boomer, it wasn't very welcomed. I was told to man up, real men don't cry, that kind of feedback. And so I was taught, programmed to suppress my emotions. And when I was 14, my cousin, my hero, he was a judo champion. He taught me many things, committed suicide, and it was a very traumatic experience for our family. And again, I wasn't allowed to grieve, I wasn't allowed to show emotion. I was told to be strong for my mother, seeing it was her nephew, her blood relative, and very much had to suppress those emotions all the way through my late teens, my early 20s. I started to numb myself with alcohol and drugs and women and just partying. Kind of a similar story to many men who I've spoken to in this day and age, who face this kind of, I guess, an identity crisis as they start to hit puberty and start to become men. It's like, where do we go from here? We don't have rites of passage. We don't have these initiations that were so prevalent with our ancestors, right? These ancient wisdom traditions. And so I found that in many different ways and eventually fell into plant medicine. I went out to Peru when I was 23, lived with the Shipibo in the Amazon, and learned their ways, and found that this was a way to start my journey, to open my heart, to let down the walls, to take off the masks I've been wearing, hiding my emotions, hiding my sensitivity, hiding my weakness from other men. And I learned over time that vulnerability is a strength. And that's what brought me to men's work, sharing in circles, being honest about my experience, being drawn to people with different backgrounds and yet similar experiences. We talk about the archetypes in men's work. So there's these archetypical expressions of masculinity and femininity, and really found that kind of Jungian psychoanalysis approach was very beneficial to my old patterns, my wounds, and how my behaviors were based in traumas and experiences of the past. And I learned to rewrite, rewire, refire those neural pathways. And when I got to Sacred Sons, I'd already been doing men's work, I'd already been holding space, facilitating circles and councils, breath work, etc. And I found that this was the most pioneering, cutting edge way to get embodied, to lead from the heart, and to somatically approach what it is that's been holding men back for so many generations.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I'm sure, like you said, so many men listening to this and so many women that know men, like that story is like universal to the human. It's amazing. It's amazing how many men have that
Yeah.
very similar journey. But like you just shared in that, that thing with your friend, so many men don't make it as far as plant medicine, don't make it as far as the places anti-men circles, and they don't get there. And
Mm.
like, I grew up in Ireland, and like, I know Luke was part of the, your team. So many cultures like that, like men's work is pretty much unheard of. Even now in Northern Ireland, it's
Yeah.
pretty much unheard of. Luke's going to go up there and do something. But like you said, like, showing emotions, it's just was not, it was not a thing. It was seen as a weakness, and if you showed it, it was usually after you've had too many drinks and stuff like that. But yeah, it's incredible how many men have that, similar experience, that similar theme. And we don't have, in general, don't have a support network, don't have someone, that can have this conversation. We just go down the pub and, you know dull it and numb it, and think about anything else. But it's such a blessing to be alive at this time now, where we've come through that, and there are things like Sacred Sons, there are things like men's work that have been around for years, but I think it's still quite small if you take the population of men on the planet. What do you
Yeah.
feel? That's amazing how your men's circle was pre womb, and the womb,
Yeah.
your first, it was destiny. And that
Mm.
that age of 14, that's interesting, because that was exactly, it was 13, 14 was the exact same
Mm.
time for me as you, down the exact same path, and ended up with Sheepibos, but a whole lot later. Um,
Mm.
what do you find? Because I was reading a book today about, it's called Raising Boys, and they talk about
Mm.
specifically exactly this age, 13, 14 years old. Um, what do you feel? Of course, we know the general um, environment for men, exploring their emotions has not been there. But what do you feel is key about that specific time in their lives, 13, 14? It seems to
Mm.
be a recurring pattern then.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the early teens can be the most challenging for a young person. A whole fresh dose of yeah, hormones, right? Adrenaline, the body's changing as well. And I found that at that age, what really helped me was actually martial arts, was discipline, was learning how to channel these strange new emotions like anger and rage and also grief and sadness, things that weren't quite taught to me as a young man. And so, as I was speaking to earlier, like these rites of passage are missing in our day and age. And I think it's important for young men, particularly. I've got nieces and I've got friends with sons. So I've been around some young people and I just notice there's so much energy. I see that in myself, in my past, just running around. Grew up in London and Bangladesh and Pakistan and all over the world. So kind of had these various backdrops to go into and experience different cultures. And so something like a martial art is a great way to tap into culture, to tap into the body, to come back to that kind of primal essence that young children probably have more access to than we as adults have. We kind of get taught to forget a lot of our base instincts. So that's kind of what I see, young people being free, being wild. And I've had to learn to rewild myself the older I've got. I've come into nature. I moved to Portugal and I'm here looking at this beautiful mountain as I speak on this podcast with you. And I realize that this is what I've been calling for all along, to get back to where it all began.
Beautiful. I want to ask you that our viewers didn't get the benefit of your signature
Mm.
intro. I want to ask
Mm.
you about that because you just mentioned London, Pakistan, but what did you say? What was the third place?
Bangladesh. Yeah,
Bangladesh.
yeah.
And so the first time,
Glastonbury.
Glastonbury as well. Wow, okay, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
Because the first time that you'd sent me a voice message, I was 100% sure, I didn't say this to you, I was 100%
Mm.
sure you were from New Zealand. And then I don't know why.
Mm.
So I'd love to hear,
Mm.
maybe if you could share your signature greeting
Shoo-wee! Aloha, brohas, bukaye, brothers. Peter checking in from Sintra, Portugal. Yeah, bro, it's interesting you say that because I've been reflecting on this, and for me, it feels a bit like a mantra or like a calling card. It's like it's my expression. It's what clears my mind and connects to spirit, kind of like channeling.
Mm,
And my mum always used to go shooey like at home. And I remember I was on a radio show. I had my own radio show during lockdown. It was a digital radio station called Shoreditch Radio, and I was doing like the well-being hour. And I was listening back to some old recordings, and I would say shooey. And then when I went to the States and I joined Sacred Sons, I was initiated at my first EMX, embodied masculine experience, in San Diego, just on the border with Mexico, in the desert. When they first asked me to step into the circle, for some reason I added this twist, this shoo wee, and it became kind of like a calling card, as I said, like my signature, and also this combination of my ancestry from my mother, Ethiopian, Arabic, Middle Eastern side. They came through the desert as nomads, as Bedouins.
wow.
Settling in the Horn of Africa, and my father, who has British, well, yeah, Gaelic, Celtic ancestry, also going back to South America. He was born in Guyana. And so
Wow.
like I sense what it is kind of this connection to ancestry and also this renewal, what we call the ancient future at Sacred Sons, which is, yeah, drawing from inspiration of the past and also setting our own present to bring about a brighter future.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and every time that you brought it together, when we come together in space, it's like a calling card, and it's like a centering, and it's
Yeah.
fun, and it's powerful. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I love it,
Can I
and
share a story?
so what's that?
Can I share a story?
Please, of course.
Because there's another depth to this, and I recognize that we can go quite deep, Martin. You and I, we connect around the fire at the EMX here in Lisbon, and I really see you, and I see your capacity, your kind of interdimensionality, as we shall say. And I've done various initiations in my 20s and 30s. I mentioned going to South America to work with the Shipibo in the Amazon, and I also went to Gabon to work with the Buiti, with Iboga. It's another plant medicine from my motherlands. And during one of my first ever ceremonies, I saw like a spirit guide, someone who'd been with me for a very long time. And I remember like there was all this murmuring around this individual, and it was all about the sound he was making and where he was from. And everyone kept repeating it. And it was raising the vibration of the people, of the planet. And I reflected on that experience, that vision many years later, and I realized that was the beginning, that was the seed of this sound and the check in. I always say my name, I always say where I'm checking in from. And I was like, wow, like this is actually what you shared. It's about centering, it's about coming back into the space, cutting through the noise, bringing us together, and also raising our vibration. And so I've started to kind of look more and more at that which we don't see with the naked eye, beyond the veil, as some should say. And I'm really interested actually to talk a bit about that side of things, because it's not often I get the opportunity to really connect with someone who, yeah, looks to the stars.
For sure, yeah. But so when we were gathered around I've been sharing light language and this interdimensional stuff for many years, but again, like, I think we talked about it, is like most of the spaces that I have been in has been, and it's been a beautiful thing, but it's been 80% woman and 80% and 80 to 90% feminine energy. And when we were around the fire, like our star being friends just get like you're to deliver a message just in light language, and there was a bit of fear with me. There was a bit of fear because
Mm,
usually the places where I'm sharing it, it's kind of expected, and in that place I
mhm,
know there was many people that would hear this for the first time and think, what is going on? And I know because they told me,
mhm.
no, they had no idea, which is hilarious. But there was a little bit of hesitation, a little bit of fear, and it was just like, go for it.
Yeah,
But yeah, so this,
beautiful.
because it's interesting, yeah, how this links with your, that signature soul song, I'm going to call it.
Mm,
It's like
mm,
this vibrational language that steps
mm,
beyond our normal, natural, like, communication ways here, and
mm.
it's the way I understand it is it's like a bridge between this communication that we're having, verbal communication, body language communication, and going to complete, full, empathetic, telepathic, full communication where we just know
Yeah,
every thought
yeah,
instantaneously of every being around us. This is kind of a bridge
yeah,
between this, and speaks directly to the heart. It was interesting
yeah.
because you right away you were tapping in, and you were like tapping in. I think you were Arcturian. I think is like straight away you were feeling into.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing how that some people will feel it, and other people
Mm,
feel absolutely nothing. Like my wife. My wife feels absolutely nothing with this, and other people
mm,
just
mm.
explode. They feel it in their heart. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Well, what I'd like to sprinkle, if it's okay, Martin, is like
sure.
how around the fire, this kind of ancient practice is such a beautiful way to connect, and that's what I love about Sacred Sons. That's why in February, from the 6th to the 9th of the month, that long weekend, we're doing a prime leadership in Lisbon. Again, it's a small intimate gathering around the fire, and it brings this opportunity to be authentic, to
Mm,
express from our heart. And whether that's light language, whether that's medicine songs, whether that's poetry, storytelling, like that's where I feel most at home, to be honest. Like just holding court around the fire, and like you felt that, right? You must have felt
sure.
safe enough, kind of welcomed enough, like this non-judgment free space to be there and actually express something that was true to you. And this is what I always speak about with Sacred Sons. It's like the tribes coming together, and so many people have various lineages, backgrounds, whether it's your blood, your in your DNA, or like you said, the star beings, our soul family.
Mm,
And I'm really honored to have seen that, to experience that, and also to be exploring this side, having, yes, I shared a little bit my own sort of heritage on Earth, this beautiful planet, and also feeding into what's beyond the Earth and what I've experienced in plant medicine to meditation to deep breath work.
beautiful, beautiful. It's incredible how, yeah, the plant medicine, meditation, and breathwork all like
Mm,
absolute pillars in this journey of mine. And I feel like, you spend time with the Shipibo. I
mhm,
feel like their chants, the Icaros, that's light language.
mhm,
That's light language to me.
mhm.
Although, they have a language that's um, translatable. Let's say light language doesn't necessarily have a translation, but
Yeah.
I feel when I'm there with them, it's just wow. It's just incredible you can't spend time in those spaces and not experience multidimensionality, interdimensionality. I mean, there's
Ooh,
probably some people do. I don't know, but I know when I step in there, like,
for sure.
being already open to it, and just it's all all veils are dropped. We were in Peru. I
Yeah.
was actually there with my wife, and we were with a 83-year-old Shipibo shaman, and she'd been doing medicine since she was 13 with her
Mhm,
grandfather. And we
mhm,
actually got to be in space with, there was only three of us, myself, my wife, and one German lady. And normally in Peru you could be with 20, 30 people. It was
Mm.
incredible, but incredibly challenging also the first couple of days
Yeah, surprising.
because it was the first time that my wife had she didn't have any of my or your sort of history. She barely even
Mm,
drank alcohol. She'd never smoked. She'd never done any drugs.
mm,
And
mm,
here she was having her first experience of anything with a 10-day
mm,
diet in the Amazon
mm,
with Mother
mm, mm,
Ayahuasca. And I
mm.
don't know if you were you in Brazil or Peru? The people were in
I was in
Peru,
Peru.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you heard of the Tree of Light? Because other than this time and spending this time,
Mm,
I'd never heard of it before or
mm,
after. We did
mm.
ayahuasca, and this it was called the Tree of Light, along with the Mother Ayahuasca. Have you
Oh,
heard of it?
it's another plant.
It's another plant, yes, and
Okay.
they call it the Tree of Light, and they
Mm,
say that the tree literally, the actual tree that it comes from, literally glows in the night.
mm,
And again, I hadn't before it, I hadn't heard of it. We were going for ayahuasca, and this just
mm,
happened to be that this, this shaman, this lady, she worked with this plant as well. So it was 5 ceremonies, and on the you would
mm.
work with the Tree of Light and ayahuasca. But yeah, wow, it was an intense, beautiful journey.
It's one of the most intense and beautiful, exactly. And this is what I speak to, is that not every person necessarily is called to plant medicine, although I feel it's important to experience altered states at points in our lives. And that's part of this initiation I was talking to earlier. And that can happen in various ways, various modalities, right? From plant medicines to men's work, right? Coming to a Sacred Sons event, to even breath work or meditation or martial arts. Like there's so many different ways to experience it. And what I learned when I was in Gabon, working with a maestro, a master out there, was these various bodies that we as human beings have access to, from our physical body to our astral body to our light body, and how it's all about vibration, how we can create this separation or this connection determined by how we show up in the world, that we create our own reality through our mind, which is all. So it's really inspiring to know that you brought your family along for the ride, that there's other people out there, and also not to put anyone down, or to encourage anyone to do things that don't resonate with them. There's so many different ways to access this information.
Absolutely. I'm curious to hear your experience on this because I found my way to breathwork very early on in my journey, and it was
Mm,
just everything changed. The when I knew the first moment that came to my life, I was like, this is one of the reasons I'm on this planet. It was just like I just knew.
wow.
It was
Yeah.
instantaneous. It was incredible. And then I found my way to plant medicine after that.
Mm.
But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because you've experienced both. I
Mm,
found that that like you said, I don't feel that plant medicine is for everyone. Those who it is
mm,
for will be strongly called, and they won't be able to avoid it. Will just call them so strongly. But
mm,
I did find that, and I feel that breath work people can use breath work, and I experienced it and facilitated others that experienced plant medicine like experiences purely through breathwork and
oh
nothing
yeah.
else.
Oh yeah.
I'd
Yeah, when
love
you
to.
get the DOMs and you're like T-Rexing. For
Yes.
sure, breath work is intense, and I found that it is something that most people can access, if they're willing to kind of cross the threshold, meet their edge, and
Mm,
kind of face the resistance. And yeah, I mean, I can speak to my own experience. I started with Wim Hof and kind of went that way around peak performance and
mhm,
athleticism, and then found that it was so much deeper as well, and got into shamanic journeying and learned actually at a tantric training course how far it went, and it was ancestral uh, healing for me. I saw past lives. I saw my grandmother, who I never had a relationship with, and was able to connect and actually conversate with her, purely high off my own supply, like just air, deep meditation, and being facilitated by someone of repute, like someone who is in integrity. So yeah, I believe we can go as deep with breath work. One thing I also feel with medicines, particularly plant medicine, it's about like really respecting the culture where it comes
Mm.
from. And brother of mine, one of the leaders at Sacred Sons, Carle, shared, he was like, the tradition isn't that everyone had access to this medicine. It was the shaman, it was the medicine man or woman who would who would work with these plants to then come up with a solution,
Mm.
a prescription, whatever it might be. And so, lots of people are looking for potentially a quick, fast solution, right? In this kind of modern
The
world
app,
that we're
the
in.
app, the click.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't always work that way. It's important to have some patience, to work with people, to maybe even start bringing this apprenticeship kind of like yeah, just concept back online.
That's something that, yeah, that I was exploring today. It was talking about, this initiatory processes that in many indigenous cultures across the world, where particularly young men would go through an initiatory process around this 13, 14 years old, where we don't have it in Western culture, and a lot of it's died out in a lot of even those cultures before. But that also there's ways in which we can bring that into the modern world now with mentors, with people that have been through life experience. And I think it might be the Lakota tribe, where their boys, I think it's the Lakota tribe, their boys are taken around this time and they do a vision quest, and they go and they're put on a mountain somewhere, no food for a couple of
Yeah.
days, to receive the vision of their life, their manhood, their masculinity, their life and purpose in the world. But something that I didn't hear before, and I might not be getting this right, that the tribe, but they say when they come back from this, there's a 2-year period where those boys do not speak directly to their mother, because this is their
Mm,
initiation into manhood. And the belief was that if they go through that initiation and then they go
mm,
straight back into their mother's arms in a way,
mm,
they fall back into that boyhood and don't become the man that
mm,
they are. And then after that 2-year period, they would meet their mother as as an initiated masculine, evolved, embodied man. And
mm,
most people in the modern world, most mothers, most sons, most they that would seem quite extreme to hear
mm,
that. But
mm,
we went, let's say, I'm sure it's not extreme for them. That comes from deep wisdom and years of experience. But we have
mm,
to find, I feel like, this ancient future you talked about. We have to
mm.
find, because we've gone to the other extreme where there's no initiation, absolutely none, or we get initiated by our friends down the pub or in the nightclub, or on, you know, or, initiated into sexual practices by, whatever it happens, like whenever you fall into it.
Yeah,
I think this ancient future now is finding this balance between those
sure,
initiatory processes, but that can be brought into Western culture now,
sure.
where what do you feel? Of course, men's work, breath work, plant medicine are some of these.
Mm,
Is there any
mm.
other initiatory processes, particularly for boys and men, that you have come across or that you've been through yourself, that you think could bridge that gap?
Yeah, well, so many beautiful things you just shared there, and to weave it together, I really feel like being in nature, like it's such a simple concept, right? To go out, not even a vision quest or hum lecture like the Lakota. It's like just getting into the wilderness, right? I remember when I was about 14, 15, we kind of did a school trip and went camping for the first time and had to build a fire. And
Mm.
I was like, whoa, like Londoner here, like in in the middle of the forest, like trying to build a fire from wet twigs was a really important and powerful experience. And I see that all you shared in terms of like weaving this together, particularly for young boys. Like I can't speak to young girls. I mean, like I shared, I've got a couple of nieces, and I see them as equals and these beautiful wise beings, and I see the way the modern world is starting to have its influence, and I feel as like parents, uncles, aunties, right, we have a responsibility to not necessarily be gatekeepers, but also to be guides to help support the upliftment of the youth. And with young men in particular, a bit like you shared, it's this initiation from boyhood to manhood, and for them to feel safe in their masculine.
Mm,
To recognize that, like, things like being in nature, building a fire, like being able to survive, thrive, right, in these beautiful situations, will strengthen their character. And similar to what you're speaking to, like, I recognize in my journey, like, I'm so intertwined with my mother. I've had so many readings, from like Akashic readings to tarot to my astrology. And I know that my mother's a big part of my karma, and I can speak a bit to that whole story. And that coming back after 2 years, it could be different in the modern world. It could be the idea that, mothers have a responsibility to initiate their sons in a way that doesn't mollycoddle them, that doesn't, like, to give them too much comfort, to
yeah.
be to play a role in allowing these children to leave the home in different ways. Maybe it's, I speak to young parents here in Portugal. It's, to inspire them to be entrepreneurial, maybe,
Mm,
to get out there, to do things that are, following their passion, following their bliss.
mm,
So yeah, I really hear what you're saying about bringing these ancient traditions back into play, and also having that modern spin on them. And it's a combination of technology, whether it's like internal, our body, like the whole idea of, the body keeps the score, the somatics, and also this technology external, like what we have now, these tools that we can use to make our lives more blissful.
mm. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I want to just go into a little bit of something that I read about you on your website,
Mm,
just to because I like to kind of just jump around. Um,
mm,
so you there was on your website you talked about there was a period where you so a dating something like a dating
mm,
competition or something like this. Can you go
mhm.
into that, please? I want to hear about that because this because the masculine
Yeah.
and the relationships, and I'd love to hear about that because that for young men, I think there's so many distortions and things around that for young men and sexuality and you know pornography and all the things that are available
Mm,
like on a like infinite level compared to some years ago. I'd love to hear about that just a little bit
yeah.
and your journey with that.
Yeah, so to give it some context, I worked in television for a few years, as a producer, as a TV presenter, an executive, kind of working in the corporate and the creative world. And after I left that, kind of like feeling it empty, feeling burnt out, feeling it didn't fulfill, I started to become my own boss. And part of that was working as an actor, as a model, as a presenter, just following any paycheck. And one of those happened to be a bunch of dating shows. One was on MTV. There's some other ones out there online still today. And yeah, it was really interesting because this was part of my awakening, I guess. This
Mm,
was around the time I'd come back from the jungle, from the Amazon, and was putting like the integration into play. Like, how do I show up as an embodied man? How can I be more in integrity? And the dating shows don't really encourage that kind of like chivalry or the respect of the feminine. It's very much around like, how can we objectify, how can we manipulate, how can
mm,
we come across as something that this person wants. And I
mm,
learned after being on these shows and actually like getting picked 3 times as like the date, like the one they wanted to see after, that I had really just been operating from my wounds. This
mm,
little boy that felt insecure, that wanted confirmation, that wanted someone to love him, to approve, right?
mm,
And I've learned since then that actually what I was seeking was intimacy, and that's what so many young people are looking for, like somewhere to feel safe, somewhere to feel accepted, to feel seen and
mm,
heard, right? And
mm,
so what I speak to with young people is like how to really start to embody this self-love, to really love yourself, to really see yourself, to do this self-inquiry, this self-care, this self-love practices, so that you can fully show up for someone and be met by that person.
mm,
I mean, that's a whole conversation in itself. So yeah, I did the dating thing. I did the just like fulfilling this, or trying to fill this big hole, this hungry ghost in my soul, and learned that actually it was about sustaining myself, building myself up, dating myself, and being celibate for a long time to finally come back to what truly mattered.
It's beautiful, beautiful. Maybe you can send us a link so we can get a look at that. But it's amazing. It's amazing, in the life. We talked about like
Mm,
pre women, how we set up these like themes in the life. That this is what I feel as a soul. We set up these themes. It's not a predestination that you're going to experience this and this and this and this on this date, but there's
yeah.
certain themes that come together that bring us to the realizations that we wish to come to, and it's really cool, really interesting, the ones that you've shared there, how they've come together. And when we're in them, we don't really see it. It's only with hindsight that we see, wow, look how this brought me to something really profound. And I feel like a lot of times in kind of spiritual communities that I frequent, let's say, a lot of
Mm,
times there's the kind of this judgment of what we call the 3D world and the things that we do. And like,
mm,
that was my, this is my spiritual life now, and all of that stuff is the stuff I'm getting rid of. And that's when I wasn't spiritual, I wasn't awake, or I wasn't
mm,
awakening. And I feel like this is a massive, like, distortion, and actually a distraction from like the gifts of like this human life and every sort of thing that we can experience, and that there can be a gift in everything that we experience. And this
mm,
planet and this dimension offers us, it's like the it's like the gold rush for souls in this like
yeah.
galaxy, in this universe, because here
Mm,
offers such polarity, such light,
mm.
and such darkness, and such a potential to experience so many different things. And I know I've went down many of these rabbit holes and still do in this. But I feel like, do you find, because I feel like men's work is kind of a very deep in the spiritual, but it's kind of separate, not separate in a holistic sense, but it has
Mm,
its own quality. Do you find
mm.
that like this separation of spirituality and worldly things in your experience in men's work, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, the way that I can speak to that is so many people get lost in story. They get stuck in their heads, and it separates them from their body, from their feelings, from their emotions, from spirit, actually. And so I'm hearing what you're saying, because there's the other aspect, which is the bypassing, which is the spiritual communities who maybe avoid the darkness, avoid the shadow, right?
Yeah,
And for me, it's important to be in both, to acknowledge that the stories are there to serve as an archetype, as mythology, as something to be aware of, like a guide.
yeah,
And the shadows and the darkness are there as well to reveal the light.
yeah.
Right, to look at these hardships as actually blessings. And I've learned so much in delving into the pain, and looking at my triggers, and the things that are uncomfortable, to find gold in that lead, in that heaviness, to turn pain into purpose. Like, that's why we call it masculine alchemy at Sacred Sons. And that's like the one-on-one coaching work that I do with men and women. It's actually to come through all of that which is holding us back, those stories, the trauma, the words, the criticisms of our parents, of our teachers, of our friends, right? That's still like echoing in our being. To rewrite all of that narrative, and to come through more aligned, more authentic, more on track, on purpose. So yeah, I see both of those, and it's really beautiful, as you shared, to not get lost in the spiritual, to bring it back to appreciate that actually we are living on this beautiful planet, in this wonderful reality where we get to smell the flowers and indulge in the senses. And a mentor of mine once said, so many people talk about worshiping God and deities, and he's like, what about life? What about gratitude, appreciation to live, and go
Mhm.
to bed every night thanking this opportunity to live another day? And I was like, yeah, that's such a good way to frame it.
For sure, for sure. That's something that we practice with my son. Every night. there are very few nights that we don't do it. We had a couple of challenging nights last week where we didn't do it. We're a lot of energetic stuff, but yeah, at least we come up with three things that we're grateful for that day. Three
Mm,
things that we like, three wins, whatever. My wife, myself, and my son, we do it, and it makes such a difference. Like, if I think about when I was growing up, and again, not it's like my own experience and the perfect scene that I set up for myself growing up in Northern Ireland in this
mm,
little bubble of consciousness and pretty much a civil war zone, and
mm.
like that just was unheard of. You just would never. You were just always numbing yourself. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's yeah, it's such a simple thing that
for
anyone
sure.
and everyone can apply, and we can even. This is what we find because there's many days that we're going through it energetically. My wife's very sensitive, and my son,
Yeah,
of course, is. We're all in that, and things could be fine on the surface with what, but just energetically, it's just like
yeah.
some days you think, oh my god, but you can always find, just like your mentor share, just
Mm,
being alive, just breathing, just being in a body, just
yeah,
having some food to, like, so
for
simple
sure.
to find
A
something to be
roof
grateful
over
for.
our heads, clothes
Yeah.
on our back. And
Wow.
one thing I feel like I would like to speak to is that, we are very privileged, very lucky to be at this stage in history, to have the comforts, to have the safety that our forefathers, our foremothers weren't afforded, right?
Mm,
And to
mm,
actually honor our ancestors who had to go through the wars, who had to go through the famines, who had to go through the hardships so that we can be here today. And so there is this hangover of the past in my parents, in my grandparents, right? Who still feel that in their bodies, that tenseness, that the survival instinct, that tomorrow may never come. And so,
mm.
really to say my thank yous and my gratitude. And I've got um aspects of my heritage, my lineage on my altar every day that I pray to and connect with, so that I can remember what was gifted to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, this honoring of the ancestors, and that just beautifully takes me into like a moment at the EMX, and you've already mentioned it there that some Gaelic heritage, but I remember we
Mm,
were walking as amazing. We're lined up the hill and shoulder to shoulder walking up the kind of initiatory process, walking up the hill, and then you're at the top of the hill, welcoming us into the circle, and I'm walking up, and you can't hear when you get there. But as soon as I'm walking up, I'm hearing some sounds. I didn't know what it was, and I get there, and you're in Gaelic, Shidavahawalia, like
mm,
with your drum, and I'm like, "Are you serious? Like, is this just set up? This is just set up for me?" He's like, "Is everyone getting something in their heritage?"
yeah,
Tell
yeah.
tell us where did that come? So for anyone who doesn't know, like he was like drum and like a Gaelic song. A lot of
Yeah.
Irish people would know it well, but
Oh,
it was
oh.
so powerful. Oro Shidavahawalya.
Yeah, the homecoming. Well, it's interesting. I actually learned that song through Sacred Sons, and this is something that I really encourage people, whether they come through Sacred Sons or they do other initiatory experiences, to connect with songs, to connect with their lineage, with their ancestors, to connect with cultures around the world through
Mm,
song. And Sacred Sons was a beautiful way to do that. I spoke about being around the fire and how that's where I feel most at home. And that was where I first learned these songs. And that particular one really connected with me. My father being Irish, English, all sorts of mixtures, and what the words were about, which I've since learnt more of the translation. It is quite anti-establishment, quite
yeah,
revolutionary, which to some extent is what we're doing,
yeah.
going against the grain, um, and how it's welcoming the warriors, welcoming those who've sacrificed back home. And I
Mm,
really feel that when these men enter the space, that it's a homecoming. That actually, what my journey is on this earth walk is walking each other home. Actually.
mm, beautiful, beautiful. And so you mentioned a bit about your heritage and
Mm,
where you've come from, and the ancestry that we hold. Like, we're very blessed to be in a time of,
mm,
relatively speaking, if you call it, like, you take the whole of humanity, relatively peaceful, relatively prosperous, relatively safe.
mm,
Of course, in pockets it's absolutely not that, so not trying to make any sort of bypassing
mm,
blanket statement. But
mm,
within our DNA structure, within our fascia, within our being, a lot of us, I say pretty much everyone, but some to more degree, holds so much of this ancestral stuff, the things that our
mm,
ancestors went through, patterns that
mm,
they went through. A lot of
mm,
times, like times of war, times of famine, those patterns are handed down through our masculine and feminine lineages, through our mothers and fathers and ancestors. And I feel like the work that you're doing and the work, all of the things that we talked about as part of, honoring those things, but also honoring where we've come from, honoring what people have went through, but bringing it into what is real and true now. Because if you looked at the world
yeah,
through the lens of media, you would think
yeah,
the world is a very dangerous. People are at war continuously. There's a lot of hate. But if
mm,
you actually go and look in people's eyes and speak to people and meet people of different cultures, everyone at their core is beautiful, is love. But there are
mm,
many circumstances when we're taken away from the truth of who we are. And I would say conspiratorially, a lot of it is manipulated, and people are divided and ruled by pitting people against each other. But
mm,
it's so
mm,
important to get the real perspective of what is going on in the world. And the mass majority
yeah,
of people in the world are good hearted people that just want to live their lives. But
yeah,
there's such a distortion of and a magnification of the, let's say, quote, negative.
mm,
What do you feel for, let's say, young, particularly men we're talking to, but everyone,
mm,
young men, young that are coming up in the world, and they have a vision of the world that seems scary, that seems like, I could say one
mm,
of the things when I came into the men's work that I wasn't so like clearly aware of, that
mm,
I didn't never felt safe in the company of men. I
mm,
didn't feel safe in the company, man. That was a personal thing.
mm,
And doing the work more and more, like, revealed that to me and healed that. But let's say, you got some young people now are coming up in the world, like, so they're getting all of their information through social media, which
mm,
a lot of times can be manipulated and directed towards, like you said in the dating things, they can be directed towards a certain narrative. How do
yeah.
you feel, young people, let's say young people, can, get out of that viewpoint and see, because let's say it's quite challenge for them. They're being bombarded with it.
Yeah,
What do you feel
yeah.
is, a way that young people can navigate that, let's say?
Yeah, well, there's that saying, right? Your vibe attracts your tribe. And for me, it's community. It's really important to find kindred spirits along this journey, this path. Um, you mentioned mentors and also people who you share interests with, right? Whether it's some consciousness practices, whether it's like physical practices, I mentioned martial arts. Starting to cultivate the understanding that we are the ones creating our reality. And the more that we surround ourselves with high vibration, with people who have open hearts, who have good um, tendencies or good intentions, the more we'll see that reflected back in the world. It's kind of a bit like an echo chamber, right? Like when you're on social media and you see all this war and strife and hate, it's what tends to follow us around. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, young people can actually affect their own algorithm. Just change what it is you're looking at. Change
Mm,
who it is you're hanging out with. Change the conversations you're having. If you can, and you have the privilege, change your surroundings. Get out of your town, your village, your city, and go touch grass and get into nature, go to a different culture, travel the world. It's a
mm.
good way to do that.
I can say for sure, as a testament to that, that was like for me, leaving Northern Ireland, that little bubble, leaving there and
Mm,
going to Australia. Although I
mm,
messed it up and nearly killed myself multiple times, that
mm,
was the
mm.
beginning of opening of consciousness for me, getting out of that bubble. Because I was, of course, social media was literally, it was like 2007. I think,
Mm,
like Facebook and that started. I left in 2008, so social media wasn't a big thing there. But I was definitely in a bubble of consciousness, a bubble reality, and I didn't know
mm,
anything outside of that. Like any Irish
sure.
people will kind of probably be aware of this. Like our best exports are our people and our pubs. So Irish people go on holidays, but they spend 2 weeks in a Irish pub in Spain or somewhere.
Yeah,
Everywhere you go in the world, there's an Irish
yeah,
pub. So we, even when we
yeah.
go on holidays, a lot of, and then it might be different now. That was my experience. They don't even get to experience other cultures in other countries. They just go and
Yeah,
take their culture and get drunk in the sun for a couple of weeks. But yeah, no,
sure.
that definitely was
Well, that
something
that's also
for me.
familiarity, right? You know, no judgment. I guess it's just an observation that people feel safe around that which they know.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, there's a sense of, particularly for young people, particularly not even just young people, just people like getting out of their comfort zone, is to face their fears a little bit, to welcome a little bit of danger. You mentioned almost dying. Like, I kind of smiled, and I obviously don't know the backstory. I've had multiple experiences like that, and ego deaths and things that have been super transformational and actually gave me more life. So
Yes.
maybe go and court death, you know,
Yeah.
safely, respectfully.
Yeah, well, I didn't. I nearly drank myself to death multiple times, but
Oh,
but
I
it did the
see. Well,
trick.
that's
It did
part
the
of it.
trick. It did the trick.
Yeah,
It was yeah, it was
yeah,
in a hospital in Auckland where I realized
yeah. Ooh,
yes, it's either it was a decision. It was just either
yeah,
you're going to live or you're going to die, and I
yeah,
decided to live. But it still took me like 3 years or 4 years after that to actually get sober. But that was when I made the
yeah.
decision to live. Oh my god.
Brilliant.
Something you talked about there, getting out of your comfort zone and facing
Mm,
death and facing fear. The
mm,
biggest, like I'd already been connected with Sacred Sons, I'd already been connected with men's work, but the biggest draw for me, particularly this EMX, was to go
mm,
and face my fear of conflict. And because
mm,
one of the days is conflict, and you do the ritual combat, and that was
mm,
very, very powerful. That was incredible,
mm,
absolutely incredible.
mm,
Could you share a
mm,
little bit about that? Who, for people that from the outside maybe see
mm,
videos of this or see pictures of it, like you just
mm.
cannot get like a true idea of what that really is and how that's
Yeah,
done in such a embodied, spiritual, connected
yeah.
way. It's very special.
Yeah, well, we call it ritual combat. And again, this is another ancient tradition from various cultures, from various ancestry, that still is practiced today. And it's what we call an opportunity to sharpen one another, to meet a brother, to meet a friend, not as an enemy, not as competition, not as someone to dominate, someone to inspire, someone to improve. And so the way that we frame it is, come into this circle, come into this ring, to dance, not to fight. And I love this practice particularly because of what we do. We create a container where there are agreements. So you say to this person, I would like to be punched at 50%. Let's test that 50. What does that feel like on your arm? Okay, that was more of a 60. Can we reel it back, right? Maybe we'll negotiate. Maybe halfway into the 2 minute round, we'll say stop and we can go a little bit harder. And it's good as well for us facilitators to keep reminding the men in the center, what is your percentage? What is your intention? Why are you here? Do you want to face your fear of violence? Do you want to overcome, say, the tendency to hurt others, which is also another experience that people face, as the masculine, to dominate or to be dominated, right? The shadows. And so it's a beautiful way that it all unfolds. And often there'll be a process where at the end someone will huge breakthrough. They'll recognize something about maybe their inner child, some kind of boyhood wound. Often it's a great way to set a intention. You know what? I'm really unfit, and I'm going to stop smoking, or I'm going to go train more often. I'm going to meet this guy regularly in the park, and we'll go for a run. Those are the types of things that where friendships, where brothers are forged. Actually.
Mm, yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about that because I would have felt that I was relatively fit, and
Mm,
the actual, the training exercises that we did leading up to that, I could
mm,
not believe how unfit I was cardio wise. Like how
mm,
like and like I've been part of like boxing world. I have like people in my family that was professional boxers, and I've been around that
mm,
world. And when you're watching that from the outside, and people, it's funny, I've joked about this summer with a couple of my friends that were
mm,
professional boxers. And I talk about like when we were in this circle, everyone's an expert when they watch boxing or mixed martial arts. When they, but people that have never actually got into the ring and have never got punched in the face, have never felt the physical exertion of just shadow boxing. It's insane. I couldn't believe it. How unfit
Yeah,
I was cardio wise. That was
yeah,
a big one for me.
yeah.
But
It's mentally draining as well, being punched and readjusting and trying to come back to technique and the footwork, and that's why I really truly believe it's so important that young men, young women as well, like
yeah,
do some training, get physically fit, get into the body.
for sure, for sure. So I thought I was going to have to go to a war, go to a battle, go and face something that I'm really afraid of in this thing. And I thought this is going to be the big day. This is I'm going to face this fear. And
Mm,
actually, I talked about it this week. You know,
mm,
whenever you're willing to face a fear, I have found
mm,
sometimes in my life, you actually don't have to face that fear. You actually
mm,
might find that that actually wasn't the fear, it was actually
mm.
something below that, it was something different. And that was the case
Yeah.
for me. I didn't feel the fear when I was in the combat, I didn't feel the fear when we were doing the practices and you were getting hit in the face. It was something
Mm,
else. And I found
mm,
um, the fear that I had was a fear of myself. I didn't feel safe.
mm,
I Before I had the fear of being like in conflict or being attacked or fear safety of my wife and son, and what it
mm,
really showed me was that it was actually a fear. I was afraid of myself. I was afraid of what I
mm,
was capable of or not
mm,
capable of. I wasn't
mm,
afraid of conflict. It was a fear
mm,
of and not knowing myself. And that part that you talked about where like the facilitation is really powerful is
mm,
you set that percentage, and this is like a metaphor
mm.
for life. Whenever you set that percentage, but then what happens? You get hit in the face, or it goes on. Do you like jump massively over that percentage, and
Yeah,
you go from 50 to 90 in a split second, and
yeah,
suddenly you're in a war? That's
for
amazing.
sure.
The way that's facilitated, it's beautiful.
Well, one thing I want to weave in here as well is the idea that we talked about ancestral trauma earlier, right?
Mm,
And what I was hearing as well is that actually now that we're becoming more aware of this, now that we have this freedom, right, to look at ourselves, we've got a different lifestyle compared to our
yeah.
grandparents and great grandparents, is that we can start to break that cycle. You're a
Mm,
father, right? And
yes.
so you can see at times, I'm sure, with your son, where he sees red, right? Where like all of a sudden, whatever the agreement was goes out of the window. And
Yeah.
it's for us to know that we have that capacity too to then share this wisdom to transmit these codes so that the children can start to acknowledge where they're overstepping, where they're not boundaried, right, where their warrior is in the shadows. And so
Mm,
it's a really beautiful thing for young people, for middle age, for all ages to experience actually, so that they can acknowledge what it is to be a healthy warrior.
beautiful, beautiful. So unbelievably, it's always this way. We're getting close. We're
Yay.
getting close to an hour here. So I want
Yeah.
to get into we've already talked about the work that you do, but so you're one of the leaders of Sacred Sons, and this is a worldwide movement. And I would like highly recommend it to anyone who's watching this and that has considered or maybe has never done men's work or has been in men's work. As I said before, it's really definitely the most balanced and powerful work that I've done around men's work, and that's a testament to the leadership and the initiations that are brought through. But you also work independently of that as well. You work with men and women. Could you share a little bit about if anyone's watching this and they feel the call, they feel that
Mm,
magnetic call to be with you, to work with you, or to
mm,
to find out more about how you can serve?
mm.
Share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. To me, this earth walk, this journey is about coming home. And that's what I love so much about this work is finding what individuals' authentic expression, their fearlessness, their courage to really show up and to take up space, to be seen, to be heard, to find that intimacy, that self love that we spoke to. And so I tend to work one on one with men, with women, all in between from 3 to 6 months. And we build like a really solid framework around what their goals are, what their intentions are, what their ideal life could look like. And then we put that into practice. We actually check in every fortnight. We build an accountability system so that there's checks and balances. We can track what's been happening. We can see what's working. It's very masculine in that sense, right? Very rational, very right brain. And then we go into the other aspect, which is the creative, which is the flow, the gracefulness. And that's the processing that you saw at the embodied masculine experience, the Sacred Sons event in Lisbon, which is about the deep trauma, the deep wounds, how they're so connected to our parents, to our institutions, right? And we start to unravel those and we repattern what's been holding us back. So I love doing the coaching, the mentoring, particularly now I'm stepping into training leaders. So you know you're on this leadership training we're doing for Sacred Sons. And also what I do now is I work with people who are aligning to their purpose, who are bringing that through. Maybe they're transitioning from working in the corporate to the more conscious. I work with executives, entrepreneurs, business owners, etc., to bring about conscious leadership, peak performance, and how that can be from biohacking to mindset to flow state, all these various tools that I like to bring through that I often don't have the opportunity in these bigger EMX kind of retreat spaces. It's a bit more fine tuned, a bit more bespoke.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, yeah, I'm going to be part of this leadership program with Sacred Sons that you're leading, and I think there's still time for people, any men that want to join that. I think there's still,
We
yeah.
only have one
Oh,
place left.
okay, so
Yeah.
that one
Yeah.
being that's watching this, there's
Yeah.
one shot. There's one shot at it. Something I would just
Yeah.
like to finish with, and
Mm,
it ties into one of the fears that like around, not that I realized that I was
mm,
not feeling safe around men, and
mm,
I want to just acknowledge you and
mm,
what you held and how you held this and how you lead. And this is where
mm,
like heart leaders in this sort of vision that I've been given is like leadership before has been seen as, for men and women, but particularly for
mm,
men, has been seen as the strong leader, the stoic leader, the one that
mm,
you know doesn't show emotion in times when but the vulnerability that you show and showed in leadership, that for me was the real like game changer. I've seen it
mm,
before, but it's not common. And I just want to acknowledge that, like, that leadership with vulnerability as a man, that is
mm.
what's missing in this world. And that is like key. I really, so just want to honor and acknowledge that.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Yeah, for me, it's about being in the heart. It's about being in the gut, intention, intuition. And my operating system is joy, it's ease, it's grace, it's just being genuine and being authentic. And often that can be vulnerable. It can show that actually we can be emotional, we can have hardships, we can experience difficulties here in the moment and still let other people into our lives, a little window into our soul.
Beautiful, beautiful, brother.
Yeah.
So I want to honor your time, and
Yeah.
we're just on the hour because I think Instagram actually limits it to an hour, so we're probably just
Okay.
gone over. It might just cut that off. Who knows? But so
Final word.
just to finish it off, yeah, just
Yeah.
any final words you would leave for
Hmm.
anyone who gets to see this.
What I've really been seeing with recently is expressing our needs and how important it is. As a man, particularly, I've heard something recently that a king is someone that puts others' needs before them, that serves the people. And I feel that's a bit of a miscommunication, it's a misalignment. It's important that actually men are able to express what's true for them, particularly where there's a wound, where there's a place of pain, where there's a trigger, and communicate that in a healthy, grounded way so that it can be integrated. And often, if we feel we're kind of needy or looking for attention, that's just an expression of the little boy, the lover inside of us. And it's not wrong, it's just something that we are starting to express and actually starting to care for and love and integrate so that we can be the king, so that we can serve those archetypes within us and without us. So, my invitation is to get used to getting needy or expressing your needs at least, and allowing yourself to be free from any past kind of stories where that's not been welcome.
Mm, beautiful, brother. Thank you. Amen. A ho. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for that, brother.
Ashe.
We will put we'll put in the comments here the Sacred Sons leadership link and your links. And yeah, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, they can find you on Men's Work Coach on Instagram. I think also on Facebook, maybe
At Men's Work
TikTok is it?
Coach, mensworkcoach.com. You can find me on Facebook, etc. Yeah.
Perfect, brother. Thank you so much for
Yeah,
your time. And who
of
knows when
course.
we'll be back to we're on the same land together. Look forward to being in body together sometime around the
Yay!
fire again. Who knows? And yeah,
Beautiful.
thank you for your time,
And
brother.
see you at the leadership training this
Yes,
Tuesday, the 26th. And also, for those who are interested, we've got Portugal Prime. It's another leadership experience for Sacred Sons just outside of Lisbon from the 6th to the 9th of February 2025.
amazing, amazing.
Gee,
Thank you, my brother. Ciao,
one
ciao.
love.
See you soon. See ya.